They thought the empath was soft, too kind, too emotional, too forgiving. But what they didn't see was the storm quietly building behind that gentle smile. See, empaths feel everything, every lie, every shift in tone, every drop of pain others ignore. And while the narcissist played games thinking they had full control, the empath was watching, learning, and slowly changing. That's the part no one talks about, the part that's darker than anyone ever expected. Because when an empath gets pushed too far, when their heart finally breaks, not for the narcissist, but for themselves, something dangerous awakens. Not violence, not revenge, but silence, distance, detachment. And that silence, it cuts deeper than any loud fight. It's the moment the narcissist starts losing their grip and doesn't even realize it. In this video, we're going deep into the part of the empath most people never talk about, the hidden side, the side that doesn't cry anymore, the side that walks away. If you've ever felt misunderstood, taken for granted, or emotionally drained, this is your moment. You're not alone and you're not weak. You're just waking up. So stay with me till the end, because what you're about to hear might change the way you see yourself and the ones who tried to break you. And hey, if you feel this message in your heart, don't forget to show some love, like, comment, and join our growing family of awakened souls. This isn't just a channel, it's a movement. Let's grow together, heal together, and stand in our truth together. Because now, it's the empath's turn. And trust me, the narcissist has no idea what's coming. They always looked at the empath as someone fragile, too soft, too emotional to ever fight back. The empath cared deeply, forgave quickly, and stayed long after the pain had begun. People thought that meant weakness. They saw someone who cried easily, someone who tried to understand others, even when others didn't deserve it. But what they didn't realize is that silence hides storms. That's where everything changes. The empath may not shout, may not fight, and may not slam the door on their way out, but inside a quiet power is growing. Every tear taught them something. Every betrayal shaped their heart. Every lie made them stronger. They were not breaking, they were building. And here's the part no one saw coming. The empath was never weak. They were patient. And patience, when it reaches its edge, turns into something cold and clear. The empath doesn't need to scream to be heard. They don't need to get revenge to win. They just walk away. And that walk, that silence, that turning of the back without a word, that's the real storm. Because when an empath finally sees the truth, they don't unsee it. When they've felt enough pain, they stop begging to be seen. They stop hoping for change. And in that moment, everything flips. The one who once cried for the narcissist becomes the one the narcissist cries for. But it's too late. The empath's silence becomes a mirror, and narcissists can't stand to face themselves. They start losing control, not because the empath shouted back, but because the empath finally went quiet. And when that silence comes, it says everything. It says, I'm done. It says, you can't hurt me anymore. It says, I loved you, but I love myself more now. That silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, healing, and quiet power. It's the sound of freedom. It's the voice of someone who learned that peace isn't found by fixing others. It's found by fixing your own heart. So no, the empath was never weak. They were just waiting. Waiting until they no longer needed to explain themselves. Until the storm inside was ready. And when it came, it didn't roar. It whispered, watch me leave. Empaths move through the world with their hearts wide open. They don't just listen to pain, they feel it. When someone cries, the empath's chest tightens. When someone's angry, The empath feels the storm inside them too. They take in other people's emotions like a sponge soaking up water. A little sadness here, a little guilt there, day after day, year after year. They carry not only their own pain, but also the pain of everyone around them, friends, family, even strangers. And they do it quietly, gently, believing that somehow it's their job to hold the weight for others. But there comes a moment, a breaking point, when that sponge can't hold anymore. At first, the empath feels drained, tired, confused. They might wonder why they're always the one who ends up hurt, even though all they wanted was peace. But deep down, something is shifting. Slowly, without making noise, all that pain begins to change. It hardens into understanding, it sharpens into clarity. The empath starts to see patterns, the lies, the manipulation, the emotional games. They begin to realize that being kind doesn't mean being used, that being loving doesn't mean accepting disrespect. And from all that quiet suffering, a fire begins to rise. It's the empath you once manipulated, gaslighted, and underestimated no longer exists in the form you remember. That person, the one who cried quietly, who questioned their worth, who bent until they nearly shattered just to make the relationship work, has been transformed. They are still an empath, yes, but not the kind you knew. Because now they carry not just compassion, but clarity. Not just softness, but strength. Not just intuition, but wisdom forged in fire. You didn't realize it, but every time you lied to them, they learned how to listen beyond words. Every time you denied their reality, they began trusting their intuition more than any apology. Every moment you tried to confuse them, you unknowingly sharpened their focus. You were trying to break them, but all you did was teach them how to survive you, and eventually how to live without you. This story isn't about revenge, it's about rebirth. At first, they gave you the benefit of the doubt over and over. They chose patience when they should have chosen distance. They forgave what should have been a deal breaker. They excused behaviors they knew deep down weren't love. That's what empaths do. They see the pain behind the rage, the insecurity behind the arrogance, the child behind the monster. But the mistake wasn't in seeing your pain. The mistake was trying to carry it. You became their project, and they became your fuel. The more you took, the more they gave. The more you pushed, the more they held on. And when they cried, it wasn't just from heartbreak, it was from the weight of trying to fix someone who didn't want to be fixed. And still they stayed, because love, to them, was never shallow. It was work, it was sacrifice, it was enduring storms for the sake of connection. Until one day, something broke inside them. But it wasn't what you expected, it wasn't their heart. It was the illusion that day they stopped seeing you through the lens of hope. They started seeing you through the lens of truth. They stopped blaming themselves for the chaos and began recognizing the pattern, the gaslighting, the manipulation, the control. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That was the beginning of their return to themselves. They didn't fight back the way you feared. They didn't explode or cause scenes. That's not their nature. Instead, they went quiet. They grew still. And in that stillness, they started to heal. At first, it was slow. They still questioned, still hoped, still replayed everything, trying to make sense of it. But over time, the pain turned into clarity. The confusion turned into certainty. And the desperation turned into self-respect. You see, empaths don't stay naive forever. They evolve. What you called too emotional is now called deeply attuned. What you mocked as overthinking is now intuition. What you saw as weakness has become their greatest strength. Because now, they don't just feel energy, They read it. They no longer believe what people say, they believe what they sense. And your energy, they saw through it long before they ever said a word. But they didn't need to expose you, they needed to exit you. And they did. At first, you probably didn't notice. You thought they were just being quiet. That they'd come around. That they'd cave, like they always did. But the silence was different this time. It wasn't a pause. It was closure. It was the sound of them walking away without a final word, not because they didn't have anything to say, but because they no longer needed you to hear it. You see, healing changed their language. It made peace louder than pain, boundaries louder than begging, distance louder than devotion. And now? They no longer check their phone hoping for your message. They don't reread the old texts or revisit the memories with longing. They don't fantasize about apologies or imagine reunions. They've moved on, not just from you, but from the version of themselves that tolerated you. They no longer carry the pieces of your damage. They no longer bend to make you feel whole. You tried to break them, but what you really did was build them. Not intentionally, not lovingly, but through your selfishness, your lies, your cruelty, your absence. You were the fire they walked through, the test they had to pass, the shadow they had to face to find their light. And now that they've found it, they protect it with everything in them. They've become the person who can spot manipulation before it starts, who can say no without guilt, who can walk away without second-guessing, who knows their value, not based on how others treat them, but on how they treat themselves. This is no longer the empath who loved blindly. This is the empath who sees clearly. They don't hate you, they don't wish you harm, but they won't allow you back in, ever. Because they've learned the most sacred truth of all. You don't heal in the same place you got hurt. Now, their silence isn't pain. It's power. Their distance isn't fear. There comes a time in every empath's journey when something quiet but powerful happens. The shift. It doesn't come with a fight. It doesn't come with screaming or slamming doors. It comes in silence, in stillness. It happens the moment the empath realizes they don't owe anyone their peace. It's the instant they stop explaining, stop fixing, stop needing to be understood. And in that exact moment, the narcissist loses the one thing they built their entire game upon: control. Narcissists thrive on control. They weave their web of manipulation using charm, flattery, guilt, and subtle threats. They don't need to scream to dominate. They just need you to question yourself. They study your weaknesses, learn your patterns, and then use your kindness against you. Empaths, being sensitive and intuitive by nature, often fall into this trap. Not because they're weak, but because they lead with love. They want to believe in goodness even when it hides behind lies. And for a while, that belief keeps them stuck. But slowly, something changes. Every time the narcissist twists the truth, the empath becomes more alert. Every broken promise, every backhanded compliment, every moment of confusion becomes a breadcrumb leading to clarity. The empath starts to see the pattern. They begin to notice how the narcissist only apologizes when they fear losing control, not when they feel remorse. They realize that love shouldn't hurt this much, and that peace doesn't live in manipulation. This awakening doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow rising. The empath begins to detach, emotionally first. They stop reacting to the narcissist's bait. They stop defending themselves against twisted accusations. They stop over-explaining and justifying their truth. Then the detachment becomes spiritual. The empath starts to reclaim their energy. They begin spending more time in solitude, reconnecting with themselves, remembering who they were before the chaos. And finally, the detachment becomes physical. They leave, not in rage, but in peace. And that is where the power shift becomes complete. The narcissist, once so sure of their grip, is now scrambling. Their words, which once cut deep, now bounce off the empath's calm. Their manipulations, once effective, fall flat. The narcissist becomes louder, more desperate, more dramatic, because they know they've lost something they can't replace: access. They no longer have access to the empath's emotions, their energy, their inner world. And without that access, manipulation becomes impossible. Narcissists can't manipulate what they no longer control. You see, manipulation only works when the other person is still trying to hold on, still trying to make sense of the chaos, still hoping the narcissist will change. But when the empath no longer needs closure, no longer waits for an apology, no longer desires to be seen or heard by someone incapable of doing so, that's when the narcissist's power disappears completely, because control requires a connection, and the empath has severed it. This is not a story of revenge, it's a story of return. The empath returns to themselves, to their boundaries, to their voice, to their peace. The narcissist isn't destroyed by this, they are revealed. Without someone to manipulate, their mask begins to slip. The charm no longer hides the emptiness. The games no longer bring satisfaction. They're left standing in the ruins of their own creation, unable to rebuild what was never real. What the narcissist never expected is that the empath they once underestimated would become their greatest lesson, not through vengeance, not through anger, but through complete disinterest. The empath doesn't care anymore, and that is what truly breaks the narcissist. Not hate, but indifference. Indifference is the final door. Once the empath closes that door, it stays closed, not because they hold a grudge, but because they've healed. Healing rewires the soul. It makes manipulation obsolete. The things that once triggered pain now spark wisdom. The situations that once caused confusion now confirm truth. And the people who once drained them are no longer allowed near their energy. The empath becomes protective of their peace in a way the narcissist can't access, can't understand, and can't destroy. This power shift is permanent. And it's not just about walking away. It's about walking away and never looking back. It's about creating a new life, one that isn't built on survival, but on authenticity. The empath begins to thrive. They find joy again. They laugh fully, sleep deeply, and dream without fear. They attract people who value truth, who speak with clarity, who love without conditions. And most importantly, they become the person they were always meant to be. Meanwhile, the narcissist remains stuck, chasing new supply, repeating old cycles, trying to fill a void with attention, control, and shallow admiration. But nothing satisfies them now. Tried harder to explain themselves, to be understood, to keep the peace. But the harder they tried, the more they were twisted in circles. The narcissist thrived in that confusion. They knew how to spin the story, turn blame around, and make the empath feel like they were the problem. This emotional manipulation wasn't random, it was control. Narcissists survive by keeping others disoriented, unsure, and emotionally unstable. They didn't want the empath to see clearly. Clarity would mean power, and the empath having power was their biggest fear. But what the narcissist didn't count on was the empath evolving. Little by little, the empath began to wake up. Maybe it was a single moment, something the narcissist said that finally didn't sit right. Maybe it was a quiet thought that whispered, "This isn't love." Whatever sparked it, the fog began to lift. And when it did, the empath didn't just see the situation. They saw everything. They saw the manipulation patterns, the lies beneath the charm, the constant blame shifting, and most of all, they saw the narcissist for what they truly were, not powerful, not mysterious, but predictable. The empath who once questioned their worth now stands in it. The one who begged for understanding no longer seeks permission to feel. They've rebuilt their connection to self, intuition sharpened, boundaries firm, silence sacred. They no longer argue to be understood, they simply know. And that knowing, unshaken and unspoken, is what the narcissist cannot handle, because now the game no longer works. The buttons don't trigger reactions, the fake apologies don't land, the charm doesn't dazzle. The empath doesn't need proof or closure. They don't need to convince anyone. They've seen too much, they've felt too deeply. And once an empath truly sees you, they never unsee you. So the narcissist, who once relied on confusion, is now exposed, standing bare in the light of someone who no longer plays the game. And that is the deepest loss they'll ever experience. Not the loss of control, but the loss of illusion. The empath has evolved, and they're never going back. The narcissist thought they were breaking the empath, slowly, methodically, turning softness into silence and light into self-doubt. Every manipulation was a lesson, every lie a wound, every twisted word a thread pulled from the empath's sense of self. And for a while, the narcissist believed they were winning, they had the upper hand. The empath was bending, questioning, shrinking. But what they didn't realize was that in the process of trying to control the empath, they were shaping them. Because pain doesn't always destroy, sometimes it builds. Sometimes it chisels the edges, sharpens the soul, and awakens a strength that can't be taught by love, but only by surviving the absence of it. The empath who once cried in silence learned to sit with their own pain until it taught them everything. They studied the patterns, they listened to the lies so many times that eventually they stopped needing the truth from someone else and started finding it within. They stopped looking for validation, they stopped trying to make the narcissist understand. And that was the beginning of the shift from victim to survivor. Over time, they grew wiser, stronger, quieter, but not in defeat, in power. Their boundaries became walls the narcissist could no longer climb. Their silence became a language the narcissist couldn't manipulate. The empath stopped reacting, stopped explaining, stopped caring in ways that left them empty. And that calm, that peace, that detachment terrified the narcissist. Because now the empath was no longer prey, they were a mirror. One that reflected everything the narcissist had done, everything they were, and everything they couldn't hide anymore. And the narcissist? They're now standing face to face with what they created. They taught the empath how to endure, how to read energy, how to recognize fake love dressed in attention. They taught them what betrayal feels like, so that one day they'd never allow it again. They tried to tear the empath apart, but instead they taught them how to rebuild, stronger, wiser, untouchable. Now the narcissist is the one unsure, unsteady, lost in the silence they used to control. Because the empath has completed the full circle. They're no longer looking back, no longer asking why, no longer hurting. They're healed. They've become someone the narcissist never wanted to exist, someone who remembers everything, but no longer feels anything. And that is the ending narcissists never see coming. Narcissist power shift. Title: Narcissists can't manipulate what they no longer control. Closure. The power shift is complete. There comes a time in every empath's journey when something quiet but powerful happens. The shift. It doesn't come with a fight. It doesn't come with screaming or slamming doors. It comes in silence, in stillness. Are taking mental notes. They are weighing every interaction, and most importantly, they are calculating how much more they are willing to give, how much of themselves they're losing, and what the cost will be if they stay. This isn't fear. This is awareness. This is emotional intelligence in motion. The narcissist, intoxicated by their own illusion of power, continues. They think the empath is hooked, dependent, easy to manipulate. They mock the silence. They mistake it for confusion or passiveness. But slowly, almost invisibly, the empath begins to change. The smile becomes thinner, the eyes colder, the responses shorter, the energy heavier. This is the quiet storm building beneath the surface. It doesn't explode, it waits. Empaths don't need to scream to be heard. They don't need to throw things or argue endlessly. Their power comes from presence, from the ability to disconnect without warning, from the decision to walk away without explanation. That's the storm, the calm, clean exit that leaves no opening for return. It's the moment when the narcissist suddenly realizes that the empath they once controlled has slipped out from under them like smoke. But getting to that point doesn't happen overnight. Empaths go through waves of denial. They hope. They give second, third, and 10th chances. They try to talk things out. They believe in the goodness of people, even the ones who hurt them. But during all this, their silence grows deeper. It stops being emotional and becomes observational. They start asking themselves quiet questions. Why am I still here? What am I getting from this? Who am I becoming because of this? And slowly, the answers become clearer. They begin to feel tired, not just physically, but spiritually. The laughter they used to share becomes harder to fake. The touch of the narcissist, once exciting, now feels hollow. The words, once charming, now ring with manipulation. And still, the empath says nothing. Not because they can't, but because they no longer need to. This silence becomes their shield. While the narcissist uses words as weapons, the empath uses silence as protection. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to preserve what's left of themselves. They stop reacting, they stop engaging, they stop feeding the fire. The narcissist, desperate for control, tries harder. They push buttons, create drama, beg for attention, or flip to sudden affection. But nothing works the same anymore, because now the empath sees through it all. And when that final moment comes, it's not loud, it's not messy, it's not filled with dramatic goodbyes. The empath simply detaches. It might look like a quiet afternoon, a normal goodbye, a simple decision, but inside it's a full collapse of the old self and the birth of someone new. When the empath walks away, they're not coming back. They've already cried the tears, they've already mourned the connection, they've already replayed every memory, every conversation, every lie, and they've made peace with the truth. The narcissist doesn't get a final chance. There is no closure. There is no fight. There is only the echo of their own manipulation. And that's what breaks the narcissist. Not rage, not revenge, but silence. The narcissist is left alone, confused, grasping for someone who's already emotionally gone. They may send messages, make calls, show up uninvited, or pretend to change. But it's too late. The empath isn't silent because they're still hurting. They're silent because they've healed. And in that healing, they found clarity, strength, boundaries. This silence, once misunderstood, becomes sacred. It is the space where the empath rebuilds themselves, where they rest, breathe, and reclaim their identity. No longer defined by what someone else did to them, but by who they choose to become now. And that choice, it's rooted in power, quiet, unshakable, internal power. So when you see an empath go silent, don't mistake it for fear. It is calculation, it is preparation, it is the sacred stillness that comes before transformation. The eye of the storm, calm, focused, and ready. Not to destroy others, but to walk away in peace, to rise, to never be touched by that chaos again, because the empath has learned that true power doesn't need noise, it just needs truth, and the courage to move forward in complete silence. The empath didn't know what was happening. They questioned themselves constantly. One moment, everything felt beautiful, full of love, attention, connection. The next, They were walking on eggshells, trying not to upset the narcissist, trying to understand how everything shifted so quickly. The narcissist said things like, "You're too sensitive," or "You're imagining things," and the empath believed it. They started to second-guess their own feelings, their memory, their intuition, and that's exactly what gaslighting does. It slowly separates a person from their inner truth. For a time, the empath lived in that fog. Empaths don't seek revenge. It's just not in their nature. They don't plot, they don't scheme, and they don't waste their energy trying to hurt those who hurt them. Even after being used, manipulated, gaslighted, or broken, they still choose peace over payback. But what the narcissist never expects is that the greatest revenge is none at all. Because when the empath begins to heal, to truly rise from the ashes of that pain, it does something far more powerful than any revenge ever could. It takes back control, quietly, completely. You see, narcissists want to be unforgettable. They want to live rent-free in the empath's mind forever. They want the empath to be stuck, still hurting, still reacting. But healing? That's what erases them. That's what burns the bridge they were hoping to cross again. When the empath begins to grow, to change, to understand their own value, something shifts. They stop obsessing. They stop explaining. They stop hoping the narcissist will change. Instead, they start choosing themselves. The empath who once begged now sets boundaries. The one who stayed too long now walks away early. The one who couldn't imagine life without them now thrives in silence. This isn't revenge, it's rebirth. And for the narcissist, it's the one thing they can't handle. Because nothing crushes a narcissist more than losing access to the person they once controlled. Watching that person become stronger, happier, more peaceful without them is unbearable. Every step the empath takes in healing is a reminder that the narcissist failed to destroy them, failed to keep them small, failed to make them forget who they are. And that's the punishment, being erased from the life of someone who was once willing to give them everything. Empaths don't have to destroy anyone, they just have to heal. Because their healing is loud, it echoes. And to the narcissist, it's the sound of the door finally closing. For good. Empaths move through the world with more than just eyes and ears. They feel, deeply, instantly. Before a word is spoken, before a smile is flashed, before a story is told, they already know. It's not something they can explain in simple terms. It's not guessing, and it's not paranoia. It's energy, a frequency, a shift in the air. Empaths can sense it the way birds sense a coming storm. That tight feeling in their chest, that pressure behind the eyes, that sudden change in the room's mood, they pick up on things others miss. And when a narcissist walks in dressed in charm and confidence, the empath doesn't always fall for it. Not deep down. Something feels off. Even if they don't act on it right away, they feel the flicker. Narcissists are masters of illusion. They know how to say the right things, wear the right mask, and mirror what others want to see. But empaths can feel what isn't being said. They notice when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when the words sound kind, but the tone carries something colder, when the story doesn't match the energy behind it. They may not always speak up immediately, they may give the benefit of the doubt, but the unease sits in their body like a whisper that won't go away. This is the empath's supernatural edge. It's not magic, it's sensitivity. It's an ability to tune into emotional undercurrents, to read the invisible. While others are fooled by appearances, empaths are listening to the soul underneath. And over time, this ability becomes sharper. Experience teaches them to trust it. Where once they ignored the warning signs, now they act on them. Quietly, instantly. The narcissist may think they're fooling everyone, but they've already been seen. Long before they ever opened their mouth, the empath felt the truth. And that truth? It can't be masked for long. At first glance, the empath seems fragile, quiet, withdrawn. They don't yell, they don't threaten, they don't lash out in rage. And to the narcissist, that calmness is mistaken for weakness. They assume the empath is afraid to speak up, afraid to walk away, afraid to fight back. So they keep pushing. They lie, gaslight, blame, and twist reality, all while believing they've got the upper hand. What they don't realize is that the empath is not shrinking, they're studying. Empaths don't react the way narcissists expect. While the narcissist thrives on chaos, drama, and emotional explosions, the empath withdraws into stillness. But that silence is not surrender, it's strategy. It's the stillness before the storm. While the narcissist plays their game, the empath is watching everything closely. Every word, every pattern, every manipulation attempt is recorded in the empath's heart and mind. They see behind the mask, even if they don't say it. They feel the hidden motives in every conversation. They sense the control hiding behind the compliments, the anger behind the fake smiles, the emptiness behind the charm. The empath is quiet, not because they don't know what's happening, but because they do. They harder. They bend until their back is breaking. But pain is a strange teacher. With every tear, every sleepless night, every lie exposed, something is quietly being built inside the empath. A fire. At first, just feels like sadness turning into numbness. But then the numbness turns into clarity, and clarity becomes strength. They begin to question things more. They start paying attention, not just to the narcissist's words, but to their actions. They start noticing patterns, lies that don't line up, apologies that feel empty. The more the narcissist tries to tighten their grip, the more the empath begins to see clearly. And that's when the transformation begins. The empath who once begged to be heard starts going silent, not out of fear, but out of power. They stop explaining themselves. They stop defending their heart. They stop giving energy to the person who keeps taking without giving back. And that withdrawal, that's the weapon, because narcissists feed off attention. They need reactions. They need someone to play the game. When the empath puts down their side of the rope and walks away, the whole power dynamic collapses quietly, completely. But it doesn't stop there. This empath doesn't just walk away, they rise. They take everything they've been through and begin to heal. Not overnight, not perfectly, but piece by piece. They sit with their pain, they learn from it, they read, they reflect, they cry, but this time for themselves, not for the narcissist. And those cries aren't signs of weakness, they're the sound of old wounds being cleaned out once and for all. Eventually, the empath begins to use what they've learned. They start setting boundaries where there used to be only open doors. They trust their intuition, even when others try to gaslight them. They no longer fear being alone, because solitude is better than being surrounded by chaos. And most of all, they speak. Not in anger, but in truth. Calm, grounded truth that hits harder than any scream ever could. The narcissist doesn't recognize this new version. They try their old tricks, guilt, charm, silent treatment. But nothing works. The empath no longer reacts the same way. They're not confused anymore, they're awake. And there's nothing more threatening to a narcissist than an empath who's fully awake, because now the empath has weaponized their pain, not to hurt others, but to protect themselves. Their boundaries are sharp, their silence is intentional, their peace is guarded, and their energy, it's no longer on sale. They understand the power of walking away, of not responding, of choosing themselves every single time. And this new strength didn't come from reading a book or watching a video. It was earned through fire, through heartbreak, through endurance. This is what makes the empath an emotional warrior. They don't wear armor made of steel. Their armor is made of scars that have healed. Their weapon isn't a sword, it's wisdom. And their battlefield isn't loud, it's quiet, internal, powerful. They've become someone who can spot red flags without doubting themselves. Someone who can love deeply but never lose themselves again in the process. Someone who doesn't chase validation but stands in their own worth. And when the narcissist sees this, they don't understand it. They don't recognize this person because the empath they knew was soft, unsure, eager to please. But the person in front of them now is grounded, focused, unshakable. And that's what makes it so terrifying. The narcissist thought they were creating a victim. Instead, they forged a warrior. So yes, empaths learn to weaponize their pain, but not to destroy others, to protect their hearts, to guard their peace, to become whole. And by the time the narcissist realizes what's happened, it's already too late. The empath is gone, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. They've outgrown the chaos, they've reclaimed their light, and they've turned the very thing that was meant to break them into the reason they'll never be broken again. Empaths don't seek revenge, it's just not in their nature. They don't plot, they don't scheme, and they don't waste their energy trying to hurt those who hurt them. Even after being used, manipulated, gaslighted, or broken, they still choose peace over payback. But what the narcissist never expects is that the greatest revenge is none at all. Because when the empath begins to heal, to truly rise from the ashes of that pain, it does something far more powerful than any revenge ever could. It takes back control. Quietly, completely. You see, narcissists want to be unforgettable. They want to live rent-free in the empath's mind forever. They want the empath to be stuck, still hurting, still reacting, but healing. That's what erases them. That's what burns the bridge they were hoping to cross again. When the empath begins to grow, to change, to understand their own value, something shifts. They stop obsessing. They stop, faced the pain. They've healed. And now they've moved on in silence. That silence is loud. It echoes in the narcissist's mind. It reminds them of the one thing they fear most, being invisible to someone they once controlled. And the empath? They walk away, not with revenge, but with peace. Because letting go wasn't about punishing the narcissist, it was about finally choosing themselves. Empaths don't chase. That's the part narcissists never expect. They confuse the empath's loyalty with neediness, their compassion with weakness, their forgiveness with dependency. And so they push, they test, they lie, they manipulate. They expect the empath to always come back, no matter how badly they're treated. And for a while, the empath does. Not because they're blind, but because they believe in love. They believe in people. They want to fix what's broken, hold on to hope, and make things right. But even the deepest heart has limits. Then, one day, everything goes quiet. The calls stop, the texts don't come, the energy feels different, lighter, colder, gone. That's when the narcissist looks around and realizes the empath isn't chasing this time. They didn't leave with drama or a final goodbye. They didn't scream or demand closure. They just vanished. And that silence? It screams louder than any fight ever could. Because it says one thing loud and clear. I'm done. This kind of emotional abandonment hits the narcissist where it hurts most, at the core of their need for control. Without the empath reacting, there's no power to feed off. No attention, no emotion, nothing to manipulate. The stage is empty and the spotlight is gone. That's when panic sets in. Not because they miss love, but because they miss control. They realize the person they once pushed around has disappeared without a trace, and they don't know how to reach them anymore. For the empath, Disappearing isn't an act of revenge, it's an act of survival. It's the final step in reclaiming their peace. They don't announce their healing, they live it, quietly, fully. They don't need the narcissist to know they're done, they need themselves to be done. That's the difference. And in the end, it's not rage that breaks the narcissist, it's the absence of the one person who once held their chaos with calm hands. That silence becomes the loudest goodbye they'll ever hear. The empath cried for the narcissist, cried through silent nights, cried through confusion, through words that cut deep but were brushed off as jokes. They cried behind closed doors, hoping love could still fix what kept breaking. Every tear was a prayer for the narcissist to see them, hear them, value them. They cried not just because they were hurt, but because they believed the narcissist could change. That's what empaths do. They believe, they hold on, they give everything, even when it costs them their peace. But one day, something inside begins to shift. The empath cries again, but this time it's different. This time, the tears don't fall for the narcissist, they fall for themselves, for the version of them that stayed too long, for the love they gave without limits, for the silence they swallowed, the boundaries they erased, the voice they lost, trying to keep someone else happy. That moment, when the empath finally weeps for themselves, is the beginning of something powerful. It's the moment they stop waiting to be saved and start saving themselves. The healing doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, quiet, tender, but it's real. The empath begins to see their own worth, not through the eyes of the narcissist, but through their own. They begin to speak up, to say no, to walk away without needing anyone's permission. And each step away from the narcissist is a step back to themselves. The narcissist, used to being the center of the empath's universe, feels the distance but doesn't understand it. They sense the shift but can't control it, because now the empath is no longer holding space for their pain, they're holding space for their own healing. And once that healing starts, once those tears fall for them and not for someone else, the empath doesn't turn back. They turn inward, they rise, and they finally realize the most powerful love they'll ever give is the one they give to themselves. At first, the empath doesn't even realize what's happening. All they know is that something feels wrong. They're overwhelmed, confused, drained, but they keep giving. Giving love, giving time, giving second chances. They make excuses for the hurt. They tell themselves, well, maybe I'm overreacting, or they didn't mean it like that. And that's exactly how the narcissist wants it. A narcissist knows how to twist reality just enough to keep the empath doubting their own truth. It's a slow burn, chipping away at their confidence, shifting blame, creating chaos, and then playing the victim. The empath, wanting peace and understanding, falls deeper into the trap. They try to fix things, they try to love, charming, pretending to reflect that light back. At first, the empath saw hope. They believed in the narcissist's potential. They excused the red flags, forgave the mood swings, explained away the manipulation. They didn't understand that they were being tested, trained, and drained. The narcissist kept taking, twisting words, shifting blame, rewriting reality, until the empath was left questioning themselves. They tried harder, loved deeper, stayed longer, but each painful moment, every lie, every gaslight, became a silent lesson. What the narcissist never realized was that every wound was shaping something new inside the empath. Every emotional blow was building a map, a pattern the empath would later recognize in others. Each insult sharpened their instincts, each betrayal burned away their innocence, but in its place grew wisdom. The narcissist thought they were breaking the empath down, but they were actually building someone stronger. Someone who no longer fell for charm without substance, someone who stopped mistaking manipulation for love, someone who finally saw through masks. Without knowing it, the narcissist was training the empath to outgrow them. And when the shift happens, when the empath begins to wake up, it's quiet but powerful. The empath stops reacting, they stop explaining, they stop giving chances, they simply observe. And in that stillness, they start to put the puzzle together. The narcissist's tricks stop working, the emotional hooks fall loose, the energy that once poured out of the empath now flows inward, healing wounds, restoring strength, fueling self-respect. And suddenly the narcissist is no longer in control. They panic, not because the empath attacked them, but because the empath no longer needs them, no longer plays the game, no longer feeds the illusion. And there's nothing more terrifying to a narcissist than losing power over someone they once controlled so easily. The most ironic truth is this: the narcissist created their own end. They taught the empath how to detect lies, how to survive emotional warfare, how to rise from pain. They taught the empath the signs of manipulation, the tools of toxic control, and most importantly, how to let go. The very behavior the narcissist used to dominate others became the fuel for the empath's awakening. They were their own undoing, because once the empath learns, they never unlearn. Once they've seen the truth, they never forget. And once they leave, they never look back. The narcissist may try to return, to repeat the cycle, to test the old buttons, but none of them work anymore. The empath has outgrown the lesson. They've become their own healer, their own protector, their own source of peace. So yes, the narcissist trained the empath, but not the way they imagined. They didn't raise a victim, they built a warrior, one who doesn't fight with fists or words, but with silence, clarity, and detachment. One who no longer breaks under pressure, but stands firm in truth. The empath they once underestimated has now become the one they fear the most, not because they want revenge, but because they've learned how to live without them. That's the true ending. And the narcissist never saw it coming. The empath cared too much. They noticed the small changes in tone, the tiny shifts in behavior. They overthought every word, every cold silence, every sudden mood. They stayed up at night wondering what they did wrong, trying to fix things that were never their fault. Their love was deep, unconditional, even when it hurt. And the narcissist fed off that care. It was fuel. The more the empath worried, the more the narcissist felt in control. They pushed boundaries, tested limits, played emotional games, and watched the empath bend every time. Not because the empath was weak, but because they truly cared. But caring too much became a trap, one the narcissist counted on. Then slowly, something shifts. The empath starts to feel tired, not just physically, but emotionally. The same patterns, the same cycles, the same pain. It all starts to lose its meaning. Where once the empath would cry, they now just feel quiet. Where they once tried to talk things out, they now fall silent. And it's not anger, it's not hate, it's something much more dangerous: indifference. The kind of stillness that makes the narcissist uneasy. Because for the first time they're not getting a reaction. The buttons don't work, the control starts to slip. This is the day the narcissist truly begins to lose. Not when the empath fights back, not when they scream or threaten to leave, but when they stop caring, when their energy is no longer invested, when they look at the narcissist and feel nothing. That's when the power dies. Indifference is the empath's final weapon. It's quiet, it's calm, and it's irreversible. The narcissist can't fix it, charm it, or manipulate it. Because once an empath detaches emotionally, they don't come back. They've mourned the connection. They've not a fire of rage. It's not loud or wild. It's a steady flame, a powerful knowing. The empath begins to set boundaries. They speak less, but every word holds weight. They walk away from toxic people without looking back. They stop trying to heal everyone and start healing themselves. That pain they once absorbed, it becomes their power. It becomes their intuition, their strength, their protection. They no longer need to explain their worth because now they feel it fully. So yes, empaths absorb pain, but they don't stay broken. When they're full, they don't overflow, they ignite. And when they do, they don't burn others, they light the way for themselves. Empaths don't believe in drama. They don't believe in shouting matches, revenge plans, or hurting others just to feel powerful. That's not their way. When an empath is pushed to the edge after being lied to, manipulated, and drained, they don't explode, they wake up. And once that awakening happens, they don't fight back in the way narcissists expect. No chaos, no tears, just silence and distance. That's what makes it so powerful. You see, narcissists thrive on attention, good or bad. They need someone reacting, chasing, explaining, begging. As long as the empath is still trying to fix things, the narcissist still feels in control. But when the empath finally sees through the manipulation, when they stop explaining and simply go quiet, that's when everything begins to fall apart. The empath's withdrawal isn't just a reaction, it's a strategy. It's the quiet collapse of everything the narcissist tried to build on lies. Empaths don't need to expose the narcissist to the world. They just remove their energy, their care, their presence. And that absence, it hurts the narcissist more than any words ever could, because without someone to control, there's nothing to feed their ego. The narcissist starts to panic, not because the empath attacked them, but because the empath no longer needs them. This quiet ending is not weakness, it's wisdom. The empath realizes they don't have to fight someone to win, they just have to stop playing. And when they walk away, they take with them something the narcissist never expected to lose: access. Access to their heart, their light, their love, all gone. In the end, the empath doesn't destroy the narcissist with rage. They destroy them with peace, with healing, with the decision to live a life where the narcissist no longer exists. No words, no fight, just freedom. Not all light is pure. Some shine brightly on the outside but carry deep shadows within, a hidden fire, a silent knowing, a storm behind the softness. This is where the dark empath begins. Unlike the typical empath who absorbs pain and shows compassion openly, the dark empath still feels everything, but doesn't always reveal it. They've been hurt too many times, lied to, manipulated, used, and something inside them has shifted. They've seen the dark side of others so often that now they've started to understand their own. They're no longer afraid of it. In fact, they've made peace with it. This is not about becoming cruel. It's not about revenge. It's about awareness, shadow awakening. The dark empath knows what it's like to be broken, to cry behind closed doors, to question their worth. But now, they've stopped bleeding for people who cut them. They've stopped trying to save everyone. They've turned inward and met the parts of themselves that were once hidden, fierce, sharp, and unshakable. And what makes them so powerful is that they can still read emotions, still sense lies, still feel the pain of others, but they're no longer controlled by it. They've learned to walk away with a smile, to remain calm while others lose their masks. They don't need to prove anything. They just let the truth unfold and watch. That's what makes them dangerous in the eyes of the narcissist, because now the empath sees everything but says nothing. They don't warn, they don't chase, they just know and act in silence. The narcissist's lies can only survive in confusion and chaos, but a dark empath brings clarity, stillness, a mirror so sharp it slices through delusion. And when that mirror is held up, the narcissist has no choice but to face the reflection they never wanted to see. So remember this, not all light is warm. Some light carries a chill, and some empaths, those who've faced their own shadows, can stand in both the light and the dark and never lose their balance. In the beginning, the empath only wanted to love, to understand, to bring peace into the room. They were full of softness, with hearts wide open and minds always searching for meaning. They didn't come into the narcissist's life to fight or to change anyone. They came to heal, to connect, to care deeply. But that gentle energy was exactly what attracted the narcissist in the first place. Narcissists feed off attention, admiration, and emotional energy. And when they saw the empath's light, they moved in, fast, and,